It only takes about 10 seconds for a normal day to turn into something that never leaves you. You know what I mean? One minute you're just sitting there minding your business. The next minute someone with authority decides you don't belong, and suddenly your whole life is standing trial without a lawyer. That morning at the VA hospital felt harmless, almost boring, the kind of place where time slows down and nobody's in a rush. Fluorescent lights humming, the smell of disinfectant and burnt coffee hanging in the air, a TV murmuring the news to a room full of men who had already seen enough history for one lifetime. I was sitting in my wheelchair near the window, cap pulled low, newspaper folded on my lap, early like always, because habits stick when you spend most of your life following orders. And I remember thinking about my leg, how it still ached after all these years, and how funny it was that pain never really retires even when you do. Then I heard boots, sharp and confident, coming straight toward me, and before I could even look up, a voice cut through the room loud enough to make everyone else stop breathing. "Sir, I need to see your identification and proof of citizenship." Yeah, that happened. For a second I honestly thought I misheard him, because why would anyone say that to me here of all places? So I looked up and asked him to repeat himself, and he did, slower this time, firmer, like I was the one not getting it, like the problem was me. He said there'd been a tip, anonymous, about a suspicious elderly man using fake veteran benefits. And while he was talking, I could feel the eyes in the room shifting. People glancing over, that familiar feeling crawling up my spine, the one I'd known since I was a kid in Georgia. The feeling that no matter what you've done, no matter how straight you've lived, you're about to be reduced to an assumption. I told him calmly that I fought for this country, that I served over 20 years, that I had my VA card and my driver's license right there clipped to my jacket, and I handed them over, steady hands, even though something inside me was starting to shake. He barely looked at them, just waved them off like props in a bad play, said they could be fake, said I'd need to come with him for verification. That word verification, it sounds so clean, so reasonable, but it felt like being erased in real time. I asked him what crime I was being accused of, what probable cause he had, and he leaned in close enough that I could smell coffee and arrogance, and told me I could cooperate or we could do it the hard way. You know what that means when someone in a badge says it. The room wasn't quiet anymore, not really, because you could feel the tension buzzing. A man across the way, lowering his magazine, another veteran pushing himself up and saying loud and clear that you don't handcuff an old man in a wheelchair at a VA hospital, a nurse rushing over saying she could pull my records right now, that I'd been a patient there for decades, and the agent didn't listen to any of it. He pulled out the cuffs, the metal clicking loud enough to echo, and told me to put my hands behind my back, and when I said I couldn't stand, that my leg wouldn't let me, he said we'd do it seated, like that made it better. As they rolled me out, I kept my head up, because that's something you learn early. If you're black and stubborn and proud, you don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you fold. But inside, I was back in places I hadn't visited in years, back to being 17 and told where I could sit, back to being overseas, where at least the enemy wore a uniform and didn't pretend. At the detention facility, the truth showed up faster than anyone bothered to apologize. 5 minutes on a computer screen, and suddenly everyone knew who I was, where I was born, what wars I fought, what medals I earned, and the officer at intake looked from the screen to the agent, like she couldn't believe this had happened, like she was trying to figure out how to unring a bell that had already shattered something. I was allowed one phone call, and I called my daughter, and when she answered, I tried to sound calm, but my voice cracked anyway, and I told her they'd arrested me at the hospital. And there was this pause, this sharp intake of breath, and then her voice went cold and focused, the way it does when she switches into command mode, and she asked where I was, and I knew in that moment I wasn't alone anymore. Even after everything was confirmed, even after the databases spelled it out in plain English, they kept me there for hours, paperwork, they said processing time, no apology, no explanation, just time stolen from a man who'd already given more than his share. When I finally got out, my wrists were red, my hands shaking in a way that embarrassed me more than the cuffs ever could, and my daughter was already moving pieces behind the scenes, calling lawyers, civil rights groups, reporters, anyone who would listen. And once the footage came out, once people really saw it, the story stopped being quiet. In court, they played the body camera video, every word, every glance, every decision, and you could hear people breathing, some jurors wiping their eyes. And when I testified, I didn't raise my voice, didn't dramatize it. I just told the truth about growing up where I did, about enlisting young, about carrying wounded men through gunfire, about sitting in that chair with handcuffs on, and realizing that after all of it, after everything, I was still being asked to prove I belonged. The verdict came back unanimous: violations across the board. Damages that made headlines, careers ended, policies rewritten, and people like to focus on the money because numbers are easy, But that wasn't the point. Not really. The point was that none of this was complicated. It wasn't confusion or a mistake. It was assumption bias dressed up as authority. And if there hadn't been cameras, if I hadn't had a daughter who knew how to fight back, this would have vanished like so many stories before it. I used part of what came after to help other veterans who didn't have cameras, who didn't have anyone listening, because once you see how close you came to being erased, you don't forget it, and you don't stay quiet about it either. So here's the part that might make you uncomfortable, and that's okay. Discomfort means you're paying attention. The system didn't fail accidentally. It did exactly what it's been allowed to do for a long time. And the real question isn't whether justice was served this time. It's how many times it hasn't been when nobody was watching. Have you ever seen someone judged before they ever spoke? Have you ever felt that moment where your whole life gets boiled down to how you look? Tell me what you think, argue if you want, disagree, loudly. Share your own story, if you've got one. Because conversations like this are the only reason things change. And if you believe nobody should have to prove